That recent attack on tourists in Pahalgam, Kashmir. It was just horrific, wasn't
It's
it?
truly tragic. And it immediately brings up all those difficult questions again.
About security there and, the whole India-Pakistan dynamic. It really makes you want to dig deeper than the headline.
Absolutely. An event like this, it just forces you to look at the underlying currents and what the potential responses might even look like.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do today. We've been looking through this detailed YouTube transcript featuring Conser.
Right.
And the idea is to really unpack the situation using his insights, maybe get a perspective you don't get from the usual news reports.
Going beyond the surface level.
Yeah. We'll touch on quite a bit the intelligence aspect, possible military actions, the role of the local Kashmiris, which is so crucial.
And even the Indus Water Treaty, which adds another layer entirely.
It's a lot, definitely a complex picture. But for you listening, we want to pull out the key information, connect the dots, quickly but without losing the depth.
So, starting with the attack itself, the core point from Conser wasn't just that intelligence might have existed.
From the Balochistan train thing and statements from Rawalpindi.
Right, and that general alert for mid-April activity. But the real issue he highlighted was the gap.
The gap between knowing something and actually stopping it on the ground.
Precisely. That seems to be the critical vulnerability needing attention.
And the details he shared about the specific attack site, Basuran Ghati, it paints a pretty grim picture.
The lack of immediate security, you mean?
Yeah, no police, no military right there, apparently. And then the ambulance delay. An hour and a half.
An hour and a half wait for medical help.
In a tourist spot. He makes the devastating point that some victims might have died just from blood loss because help took so long.
Which really raises serious questions about preparedness, doesn't it? Especially if there were warnings, as the source suggests.
You'd expect better infrastructure in a known tourist area.
Definitely seems like a significant lapse if the information was indeed there.
And then there's the accountability question. Conser's take is, well, a bit cynical.
What's that?
He suggests governments might avoid suspending officials because it could expose their own wider failures.
Ah, so it becomes about managing perception, perhaps.
That seems to be his observation. Protecting the administration rather than ensuring real accountability down the line.
Which, if true, could just perpetuate the problems, couldn't it? Hinder actual improvement.
It's a tough thought. Okay, let's shift a bit to the role of the local population. This is key.
Yes, Conser makes a very direct statement here.
That these kinds of terrorist activities, they just can't happen without some level of local support.
It's a hard reality in many such conflicts, isn't it? The relationship between militants and locals is almost never simple. You need that local knowledge, shelter, logistics.
But he immediately follows that up by highlighting these incredible acts of bravery by Kashmiris.
That's the crucial counterpoint.
Najakat Ali, the guide saving 11 people. Majid Khan, the driver getting 6 out.
And Syed Hussein Abid, who fought back and tragically lost his life. Murders.
And the source claims these heroic acts were actually underreported. That's quite something if true.
It shows that duality, doesn't it? While some level of local complicity might exist, as Conser states, there's also immense courage and resistance against this violence from within the community.
It completely challenges any simple narrative about Kashmiris.
Absolutely. These stories are vital.
And it wasn't just individuals. He mentions the Srinagar community's response to the shutterdown strike.
And the condemnation from the Jama Masjid Imam that shows a broader rejection of the violence.
Sense of unity, maybe. Shared grief.
It could indicate a shift. Maybe the increased tourism and economic activity since the Article 370 changes are playing a role.
That's an interesting connection, providing alternatives.
Right. Article 370, just to remind listeners, was the constitutional provision giving Jammu and Kashmir special status, which was changed significantly.
Which brings us to Conser's suggestions for, rewarding the support of locals.
What kind of rewards?
Things like land allocation in orchards, dry fruit, saffron, apple areas, or just public recognition for their bravery.
So positive reinforcement.
Yeah, the idea seems to be incentivizing helpful actions, discouraging the stone pelting, the patharbazi, rewarding cooperation.
That sounds pragmatic, focusing on building goodwill, not just punishment. And it ties into that announcement from Maharashtra's government too, right?
Yes, Eknath Shinde offering compensation and help for the affected families shows support from elsewhere in India too.
Okay, some motives. Why did the terrorists do this, according to Conser's analysis?
He sees two main aims. First, trying to create divisions within India.
How so?
By specifically asking the tourists their religion, and then targeting the Hindus. The goal, he thinks, was to spark communal unrest across the country.
A classic and very dangerous tactic, trying to tear the social fabric.
But as he points out, it seems to have failed. There wasn't widespread communal violence.
And we just talked about the local Kashmiris helping the victims, regardless of religion.
Exactly. So that divisive strategy didn't really work out as planned, thankfully.
What was the second motive?
Economics. Discourage tourism.
Hit them where it hurts financially.
Precisely. Less tourism means more unemployment, especially among the youth, making them potentially more vulnerable to, recruitment.
But Conser contrasts that with the reality that tourism has been increasing since the Article 370 changes.
Yes, he highlights that this growth provides real economic opportunities, acting as a counterforce.
So attacking tourism is an attempt to reverse that positive trend and create desperation.
Seems to be the logic. Okay, this is where the conversation shifts toward potential Indian responses.
Yeah.
And first up is the Indus Water Treaty.
Right, the 1960 agreement. Could you just quickly recap the basics?
Sure. Essentially, Pakistan gets the rights to the western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab.
And India gets the eastern ones, Sutlej, Beas, Ravi.
But it wasn't quite carte blanche for India either. There were limits on our usage initially. We've since built dams like Salal, Baglahar, Dulhasti.
Kishanganga as well, utilizing our share more fully.
Exactly. But now, in response to this attack, Conser suggests something quite different.
Using water as leverage.
Yeah, temporarily withholding water, maybe during Pakistan's crucial growing seasons for rice and wheat.
Wow, okay. To damage their crops, create economic pain as a sort of retaliation.
That's the idea presented, a direct response to attacking civilians.
He does acknowledge India doesn't currently have the full infrastructure for, long-term massive storage to do this indefinitely.
But the idea itself is huge. Shifting from a cooperative treaty to using water as a strategic tool, that has massive implications.
International ones, definitely. It's a major potential paradigm shift.
And he doesn't stop there, does he? He talks about long-term possibilities.
Yeah, like diverting Indus water towards Rajasthan, the Thar Desert.
Through new canals parallel to the Indira Gandhi Canal.
That's the concept floated. Address India's own water scarcity issues.
Which, could have huge benefits for agriculture and livelihoods in those dry areas. It connects security response to development goals. And he even links it to industry, suggesting that with more water, Punjab and Rajasthan could develop water-heavy industries like paper and pulp.
Referencing that old civil services exam question about water consumption, interesting detail.
It shows he's thinking holistically, retaliation, yes, but also long-term internal benefits for India.
He also mentioned diverting water towards Delhi, didn't he?
Using aqueducts potentially to help clean up the Yamuna River by increasing flow.
And installing iron nets to catch waste. That's quite specific.
It really shows this multi-pronged thinking around the water issues, security, environment, resource management, all tied together.
Okay, let's turn to the more direct military responses discussed.
Right. Conser touches on this idea that Pakistan might actually want a limited incident, like an airstrike.
Why would they want that?
His analysis suggests it could be to boost the relevance or standing of their military leadership internally, a sort of political maneuvering.
Interesting take, but what does he recommend?
Something much, much bigger. He advocates for an Israeli-style response.
Which means?
Targeting critical infrastructure, specifically power plants and the national grid, aiming for a nationwide blackout, especially during the summer heat.
That's incredibly assertive. Hitting civilian infrastructure like that carries huge risks, doesn't it? Escalation, international condemnation.
Oh, absolutely. It's presented as a decisive, crippling blow. The potential blowback would have to be weighed very carefully, of course.
And he suggested more targets, too?
Yes. Oil refineries, depots to disrupt transport, and major bridges, railway junctions, to basically paralyze movement across the country.
It sounds like a strategy aimed at complete economic and logistical paralysis, not just a military strike.
That seems to be the focus. He even suggests a two-pronged approach, a naval blockade from the south, combined with these comprehensive strikes from the air. Short, sharp, but with long-term economic consequences.
A very aggressive posture being proposed there. Now, what about the infiltratration problem itself? The source addresses that too, right?
Yes, Conser points out the obvious challenge. The geography.
Yeah.
Mountains, dense forests. Perfect cover for infiltrators.
Makes border security incredibly difficult.
So his proposed solution is, well, radical. Clear the vegetation.
How much?
A strip, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers wide along the border. Just remove all the natural hiding spots.
Wow. He acknowledges the environmental impact, I assume.
He does, yes, but argues national security has to take priority in this context. It's a stark trade-off.
Balancing security and environment, always a tough one.
And to stop things from growing back, he suggests cement blankets.
Cement blankets, what does that even mean?
Basically spreading cement mixed with water over the cleared areas to prevent regrowth.
That is unconventional, to say the least. You'd have to wonder about the long-term ecological damage of just pouring cement everywhere.
It's definitely a novel, perhaps brute force approach aimed at a permanent fix for that particular problem.
And he also mentioned tunnels.
Acknowledging that terrorists might use tunnels, he suggests using huge dredging machines for deep drilling along the border.
And then what?
Fill the boreholes with cement, creating underground barriers, a massive engineering project to counter subterranean threats.
He's really thinking about every possible angle of infiltration. Okay, what about the war of words? The rhetoric from Pakistan.
Khanser addresses some of that, like the Pakistani PM saying stopping water would be an act of war.
And his response?
Pretty dismissive, according to the source, referencing past military defeats for Pakistan. A very assertive pushback.
And there was that other statement he mentioned about rivers of blood.
Yeah, he calls it like a firecracker or just a foolish statement contrasting this dramatic rhetoric with Pakistan's actual existing water scarcity issues.
Highlighting the gap between fiery words and on-the-ground reality.
Then there's that really interesting, potentially explosive bit about an alleged interview.
The one with the Pakistani defense minister.
Yes, where this minister supposedly admitted, quite frankly, to sponsoring terrorism in India for decades, apparently at the behest of the US and Europe.
That's a bombshell claim, if accurate. Khanser noted the European journalist's reaction too.
He did. Again, we have to stress, this is the source's account of the interview, but it's presented as a moment of startling honesty about geopolitical motives.
It certainly adds another complex layer, if true. What about the nuclear threat?
Pakistan mentioning its, 130 missiles? Khanser's reaction, as presented, is again quite dismissive.
How so?
Suggesting India would only need to hit a few key targets. And make sure to mention India's S-400 air defense system.
So, projecting confidence in India's strategic capabilities and downplaying the nuclear threat, essentially mentioning defensive shields.
It seems that way. Okay, finally, we get to some really unconventional warfare tactics proposed.
These sound intriguing. What were they?
One idea was about messing with the arms supply chain within Kashmir.
How?
By introducing modified bullets, either slightly too big so they damage or explode the gun when fired.
Ouch, risky for the user.
Or bullets that had been boiled, apparently rendering the gunpowder ineffective. Subtle ways to disrupt their weapons.
Interesting. Sabotage at a micro level.
And then the really high-tech idea, nano GPS chips.
Embedded in what?
In smuggled rifles. The idea isn't immediate action, but tracking.
Tracking the terrorists.
Exactly. Following their movements, their activities, maybe for 6 months or so, just gathering detailed intelligence before making any move.
That's straight out of espionage fiction, using their own smuggled weapons against them for long-term intel gathering. It would be a goldmine of information, wouldn't it? Understanding networks, patterns, providing incredible strategic insight before any strike.
So wrapping this all up, it's been quite a journey through the complexities. We've seen the intelligence issues, the local bravery, the potential strategic shifts with water, the hardline military options, the border control ideas.
And these really unconventional tactics at the end. It shows the multifaceted nature of the challenge.
And throughout, as you said, understanding the motivations, the why behind it all is just critical.
And this analysis, based on the Khanser material you provided, certainly gives a unique and detailed perspective, doesn't it? Lots to think about.
It definitely does. And it leads us, and you listening, with that final, quite provocative question that Khanser apparently posed to his own audience.
Which was?
Should India actually consider these unconventional tactics, embedding GPS chips in smuggled guns, modifying bullets, boiling them?
It forces you to confront the ethical questions, doesn't it? Alongside the practical ones. What lines are acceptable in pursuing peace and security?
Exactly. Is it purely about military might? Or do these other, perhaps, ethically gray areas come into play in such a complex, long-running conflict?
It certainly underlines that there are no easy answers, and maybe the solutions require thinking far outside the conventional boxes.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. And understanding these nuances, these different angles we've discussed today, it really is vital if you want to be genuinely informed about what's happening in Kashmir and the wider region.